The mist from Niagara Falls created an ethereal veil across the observation deck. As Emma Rodriguez adjusted her camera strap, the thunderous roar of cascading water drowning out most conversations around her. It was July 15, 2019, and the 22-year-old college student from Buffalo had joined her photography club for what was supposed to be a routine weekend trip to capture the iconic waterfalls. "Emma, stay close to the group," shouted Professor Martinez over the deafening sound of millions of gallons of water plummeting into the gorge below. The morning sun cast rainbows through the perpetual mist, creating perfect conditions for the dramatic shots they'd all come to capture. Emma nodded, but her attention was already drawn to a less crowded section of the American Falls viewing area. While her classmates clustered around the main observation points, snapping predictable tourist photos, she noticed how the light hit the rock face differently from a more secluded angle. Her artistic eye couldn't resist the opportunity. "I'll just be a minute," she called back, though her words were lost in the natural symphony of rushing water. The photography club consisted of 12 students, all eager to complete their summer assignment, a portfolio showcasing the power and beauty of one of North America's most famous natural landmarks. Emma had always been the most adventurous of the group, often wandering off to find unique perspectives that others missed. Her professor had learned to expect this behavior, though he always worried about her tendency to prioritize the perfect shot over safety. As Emma made her way toward the quieter section, she passed families taking selfies, elderly couples holding hands while gazing at the falls, and tour groups following guides with colorful umbrellas. The international mix of visitors created a constant buzz of different languages and excited exclamations, all united by the awe-inspiring natural spectacle before them. The path she chose led slightly away from the main walkway, toward a section where the barriers were older and the crowds thinner. Here the mist was heavier, creating an almost mystical atmosphere that made her heart race with creative possibilities. She could already envision the moody black and white photographs she would develop, capturing the raw power of nature in a way that tourist snapshots never could. Emma spent nearly an hour in that secluded area, completely absorbed in her work. She experimented with different angles, adjusted her camera settings to capture the perfect balance of light and shadow, and even ventured closer to the edge than she probably should have, always in pursuit of that one extraordinary shot that would set her portfolio apart. The sound of the falls was hypnotic, and combined with her intense focus on photography, she lost track of time completely. When she finally looked up from her viewfinder, expecting to see her classmates nearby, she found herself alone. The observation deck that had been crowded with her group was now occupied by entirely different people. Panic began to set in as Emma realized she had no idea how long she'd been separated from the others. She quickly packed her camera equipment and hurried back toward the main viewing areas, scanning the crowds for familiar faces. The summer heat was intensifying, and the combination of anxiety and physical exertion made her feel dizzy. She spent the next 2 hours searching frantically, checking every observation deck, gift shop, and restaurant in the area. She called Professor Martinez's phone repeatedly, but the calls went straight to voicemail. Her own phone showed no missed calls or messages from the group, which seemed impossible if they were actually looking for her. As the afternoon wore on, Emma's initial panic transformed into a deeper, more unsettling realization. Either her group had forgotten about her entirely, or something had prevented them from searching for her. Both possibilities seemed equally disturbing. By evening, exhausted and emotionally drained, Emma made her way to the local police station. Officer Jennifer Walsh, a veteran of the Niagara Falls Police Department, listened patiently as Emma explained her situation. The officer's expression grew increasingly concerned as the story unfolded. "Let me make some calls," Officer Walsh said, reaching for her phone. "We'll get this sorted out." But the calls only deepened the mystery. Professor Martinez's phone was disconnected. The college had no record of a photography club trip scheduled for that weekend. Most disturbing of all, when Officer Walsh contacted the college directly, they claimed that Professor Martinez had been on medical leave for the past month and that Emma Rodriguez was not currently enrolled as a student. Emma stared at the officer in disbelief. "That's impossible," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the distant sound of the falls that seemed to follow her everywhere in this town. "I was just with them this morning. I have photos on my camera. I have my student ID." But when she reached for her wallet, her student ID was gone. Her camera, which had been full of photos from the morning shoot, now showed only empty memory cards. It was as if her entire day with the photography club had been erased, leaving her stranded in a reality that no longer made sense. Officer Walsh arranged for Emma to stay at a local shelter that night, promising to continue the investigation in the morning. As Emma lay on the narrow cot, listening to the ever-present sound of rushing water in the distance, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed in her life. The Niagara Falls, that had seemed so beautiful and inspiring that morning, now felt ominous and threatening, as if the thundering water was trying to tell her something she wasn't ready to understand. The investigation begins. 3 days had passed since Emma's mysterious separation from her photography group, and Officer Jennifer Walsh had never encountered a case quite like this one. Sitting in her cluttered office at the Niagara Falls Police Department, she reviewed the growing file of inconsistencies and dead ends that seemed to surround Emma Rodriguez like the perpetual mist around the falls themselves. Emma sat across from her, looking exhausted and confused. The young woman had been staying at the riverside shelter, and the staff reported that she barely slept, often standing by the windows at night, staring toward the illuminated falls in the distance. "Let's go through this one more time," Officer Walsh said gently, opening her notebook. "You said you're a student at Buffalo State College majoring in photography." "Yes," Emma replied, her voice hoarse from stress. "I've been there for 3 years. Professor Martinez has been my advisor since sophomore year. We've done field trips before, to Letchworth State Park, to the Finger Lakes. This wasn't unusual." Officer Walsh had spent the previous day making calls to Buffalo State College. The registrar's office had been helpful but firm. Emma Rodriguez had been enrolled there, but she had withdrawn from all classes in May, citing personal reasons. There was no Professor Martinez in the photography department, and there never had been. "Emma, I need you to think carefully about the weeks leading up to July 15th. Had you been feeling stressed? Any major changes in your life? Sometimes when people are under extreme pressure, their memory can play tricks on them." Emma's eyes flashed with frustration. "I'm not having a breakdown, if that's what you're suggesting. I know what happened. I was here with my class, taking photographs. Something happened to them, or something happened to me, but I'm not crazy." Officer Walsh believed her, at least partially. There was something about Emma's story that felt genuine, even if the facts didn't add up. More importantly, there were other strange elements to consider. Emma had been found with professional-grade photography equipment worth several $1,000s, but she had no identification, no money, and no clear way of having afforded such expensive gear on a college student's budget. "I've been in touch with Detective Sarah Chen from Buffalo PD," Officer Walsh continued. "She's going to help us piece together your recent history. In the meantime, I want to show you something." She pulled out a manila folder containing printouts from social media and local news websites. "I've been researching any unusual incidents around the falls in mid-July. Look at this." The first printout was from a local Facebook group dedicated to Niagara Falls tourism. A post from July 16, 2019, showed a photo of the Maid of the Mist boat with the caption, "Did anyone else notice how quiet the falls seemed yesterday? My family visited on the 15th, and several people commented that something felt different, less crowded than usual for a summer Monday." Emma studied the post, her brow furrowed. Monday? July 15th was a Saturday. I remember because we had planned the trip for the weekend. Officer Walsh made a note. According to the calendar, July 15th, 2019 was indeed a Monday. Are you sure about the day? The second printout was more disturbing. It was a missing person report filed on July the 17th by Maria Santos, a tourist from Toronto. Her teenage daughter, Lucia, had disappeared while visiting the falls on July 15th. The girl had been with a school group, but when they gathered to leave, she was nowhere to be found. Like Emma, Lucia had been interested in photography. The Santos case was closed after 3 days, Officer Walsh explained. Lucia returned home on her own, claiming she had gotten lost and spent the time with friends, but her story never quite made sense, and her family said she seemed different afterward, quieter, more distant. Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "Do you think there's a connection?" "I don't know yet, but I've found 2 other similar cases from that same week. People who went missing for short periods around the falls, all of them interested in photography, all of them with gaps in their memory or inconsistencies in their stories." Detective Chen arrived that afternoon, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who specialized in missing persons cases. She had brought Emma's file from Buffalo, and the contents were even more puzzling than Officer Walsh had expected. Emma Rodriguez, age 22, withdrew from Buffalo State College on May 20, 2019. Detective Chen read from her notes. According to her academic advisor, not a Professor Martinez but Dr. Linda Kim, Emma had been struggling with depression and anxiety following her father's death in a car accident the previous winter. Emma's face went pale. "My father isn't dead. He lives in Rochester. I talked to him last week." Detective Chen exchanged a glance with Officer Walsh. "Emma, I need you to call your father right now. Use my phone." With trembling fingers, Emma dialed the number she knew by heart. The phone rang several times before going to voicemail. The voice on the recording was her father's, but the message was strange. "You've reached Miguel Rodriguez. I'm not available to take your call right now. Please leave a message, and I'll get back to you when I can." "That's not his usual message," Emma whispered. "He always says, 'Hi, this is Miguel. Leave me a message and have a great day.' He said that same thing for years." Detective Chen made another note. "We'll drive to Rochester tomorrow and visit your father's address. In the meantime, I want you to think about the last clear memory you have before July 15th. Not the photography trip. Go back further. What's the last thing you remember with absolute certainty?" Emma closed her eyes, concentrating. The memories felt slippery, like trying to hold water in her hands. I remember being in my apartment in Buffalo. It was spring, maybe early May. I was packing up my photography equipment because I was moving out, but I can't remember why I was moving or where I was going. What about friends, roommates, anyone who might have seen you during those missing weeks? I lived alone. My best friend Sarah moved to California after graduation in December. I didn't really have close friends at school. Emma's voice grew smaller. I was always kind of a loner, especially after... She trailed off, a confused expression crossing her face. "After what, Emma?" "I don't know. I was going to say, after my father died. But you just told me that's what I told the school, and I know my father isn't dead. But I have this feeling, this sadness, like something terrible happened. I just can't remember what." Officer Walsh leaned forward. "Emma, I want you to stay at the shelter for a few more days while we investigate. Don't go near the falls alone. And if you remember anything else, anything at all, call me immediately." As the two law enforcement officers walked Emma back to the shelter, none of them noticed the figure watching from across the street, a man in his 50s with graying hair and a camera around his neck, who had been photographing the falls earlier that day. He had been there on July 15th, too, and he remembered seeing Emma Rodriguez, but he also remembered seeing her somewhere else at a different time, under very different circumstances. The man pulled out his phone and scrolled through his photo gallery until he found what he was looking for. It was a picture he had taken 3 years ago, not at Niagara Falls, but at a small memorial service in Buffalo. In the background of the photo, barely visible among the mourners, was a young woman who looked exactly like Emma Rodriguez. She had been crying at a funeral. The unraveling truth detective Sarah Chen's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she and Officer Walsh drove through the quiet streets of Rochester toward Miguel Rodriguez's last known address. Emma sat in the back seat, staring out the window with an expression of growing dread. The closer they got to her father's house, the more fragmented her memories seemed to become. "It's the blue house with the white trim," Emma said softly as they turned onto Maple Street. "He's lived there since I was in high school. Mum left when I was 16 and Dad kept the house because he said it held too many good memories to abandon." The house they pulled up to matched Emma's description perfectly, but something was wrong. The lawn was overgrown, newspapers were piled on the front porch, and several windows were boarded up. A "for sale" sign stood crooked in the yard, with a red "sold" sticker across it. Detective Chen checked her notes. According to city records, this property was sold 6 months ago. The previous owner was listed as the estate of Miguel Rodriguez, deceased. Emma was out of the car before it had fully stopped, running toward the front door. "Dad, Dad, are you there?" She pounded on the door, her voice becoming increasingly desperate. "This can't be right. This can't be happening." Officer Walsh gently pulled Emma away from the door as Detective Chen spoke with a neighbor who had emerged from the house next door. Mrs. Patterson was an elderly woman who had lived on Maple Street for 40 years. "Miguel died in February," Mrs. Patterson explained sadly. "Car accident on I-90 during that terrible ice storm we had. Such a tragedy. He was a good man, always helped with my groceries. His daughter took it real hard. She had some kind of breakdown at the funeral. Haven't seen her since. Emma collapsed onto the front steps, her face buried in her hands. I remember now, she whispered. I remember the phone call. I was in my dorm room studying for midterms. The police officer said there had been an accident. I remember driving here in the snow. I remember the funeral home. I remember... The memories came flooding back like water breaking through a dam. The funeral service, the well-meaning relatives she barely knew, the overwhelming sense of being completely alone in the world. She remembered dropping out of school, unable to concentrate on anything. She remembered selling her father's house and most of his possessions, keeping only his old camera and some photographs. But if I remember all of this, Emma said, looking up at Detective Chen with tears streaming down her face, then how did I forget? How did I convince myself that he was still alive? And what was I doing at Niagara Falls with a photography class that doesn't exist? Detective Chen helped Emma to her feet. Grief can do strange things to the mind, Emma. Sometimes people create alternate realities to cope with trauma, but there are still pieces of this puzzle that don't fit. They drove back to Niagara Falls in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Officer Walsh had been researching the other missing persons cases she had mentioned, and the patterns were becoming more disturbing. All of the individuals who had gone missing around the falls in July 2019 had recently experienced significant trauma or loss. All of them had gaps in their memory, and all of them had been found with expensive photography equipment they couldn't account for. Back at the police station, Officer Walsh spread out a collection of photographs on her desk. I've been in contact with other law enforcement agencies around the Great Lakes region. Look at this. The photos showed various people at different tourist locations. Niagara Falls, Thousand Islands, the Finger Lakes. In each photo, barely visible in the background, was the same middle-aged man with graying hair and a camera around his neck. His name is Dr. Richard Hawthorne, Officer Walsh explained. He's a retired psychiatrist who lost his medical license 5 years ago for conducting unauthorized psychological experiments on vulnerable patients. He's been living off the grid since then, but these photos suggest he's been following a pattern, targeting people at tourist locations. Emma studied the photographs, and her blood ran cold. I've seen him before, not just at the falls. I remember him from other places. He was at my father's funeral. He was outside my apartment building in Buffalo. I thought he was just another photographer, but he was following me. Detective Chen was already on the phone with the FBI. Cases involving potential psychological manipulation and interstate travel fell under federal jurisdiction, and they needed resources beyond what local law enforcement could provide. There's something else, Officer Walsh said, pulling out another file. I found Dr. Hawthorne's research from before he lost his license. He was studying something called induced dissociative episodes, essentially, ways to make people forget traumatic events by replacing them with false memories. His theory was that people could be cured of grief and trauma by experiencing alternate realities where their loss never occurred. Emma felt sick. You're saying he somehow made me believe my father was still alive, that he created fake memories of a photography class and a professor who doesn't exist? It's possible. His research involved a combination of psychological manipulation, mild hypnosis, and what he called environmental immersion therapy. He would take patients to locations with strong sensory experiences, like the sound and mist of Niagara Falls, and use those sensations to anchor false memories. The pieces were starting to come together, but they painted a horrifying picture. Dr. Hawthorne had been targeting grieving individuals, people who were vulnerable and desperate to escape their pain. He would approach them at their lowest points, offer them a chance to forget their trauma, and then subject them to his experimental treatments. But why would I agree to that? Emma asked. Even if I was grieving, why would I let a stranger experiment on me? Detective Chen looked up from her phone call. According to the FBI, Dr. Hawthorne was very skilled at gaining people's trust. He would pose as a grief counselor, a photographer, or even a fellow mourner. He would spend weeks or months building relationships with his targets before suggesting his treatment. Emma tried to remember meeting Dr. Hawthorne, but those memories were still hazy. She had flashes of conversations with a kind, older man who seemed to understand her pain, who offered her hope that she could feel normal again. In her vulnerable state, desperate to escape the crushing weight of her father's death, she might have agreed to almost anything. The question now, Officer Walsh said, is whether his treatment actually worked or if it's starting to break down. Your memories of your father's death came back pretty quickly once you were confronted with evidence. And there's another question, Detective Chen added grimly. If Dr. Hawthorne has been doing this to other people, where are they now? Are they living in some kind of facility where he can monitor and control their false memories? Or are they wandering around like Emma was, lost between reality and the artificial memories he implanted? Emma shuddered at the thought. How many other people were out there, living in false realities created by a madman's experiments? How many families were searching for loved ones who had been psychologically kidnapped and brainwashed? We need to find him, Emma said, her voice growing stronger with determination. And we need to find the others. If I can remember the truth, maybe they can too. Officer Walsh nodded. The FBI is setting up a task force. They want you to work with them, Emma. Your memories of Dr. Hawthorne and his methods could be crucial to tracking him down and helping his other victims. As the sun set over Niagara Falls, casting long shadows across the police station, Emma made a decision that would change everything. She would face her grief, accept the reality of her father's death, and use her experience to help others who had been victimized by Dr. Hawthorne's twisted experiments. But first, she had to prepare herself for what they might find when they finally caught up with the man who had stolen years of her life and replaced them with beautiful lies. The final revelation. 2 weeks after Emma's memories began returning, FBI agent Marcus Rivera sat in a surveillance van parked outside a remote cabin in the Adirondack Mountains. The property belonged to Dr. Richard Hawthorne, and thermal imaging had confirmed the presence of multiple individuals inside. After days of careful investigation, they had finally tracked down the man who had been conducting illegal psychological experiments on grieving individuals across the Northeast. Emma sat beside Agent Rivera, wearing a wire and preparing for what might be the most difficult conversation of her life. The FBI had determined that the best way to approach Dr. Hawthorne was through someone he believed was still under his influence. Emma would pose as a patient experiencing memory problems, seeking his help to maintain the false reality he had created for her. "Remember, Emma," Agent Rivera said softly, "he's going to try to manipulate you. He'll use your grief about your father, your vulnerability, everything he knows about your psychology. Stay focused on the mission. Get him to admit what he's done and reveal the location of his other victims." Emma nodded, checking the small recording device hidden in her jacket. Over the past 2 weeks working with FBI psychologists, she had recovered most of her real memories. The process had been painful, reliving her father's death, acknowledging the months of depression and isolation that followed, but it had also been liberating. She was finally living in reality again, no matter how difficult that reality might be. The cabin was surrounded by tall pines, isolated from any neighbors who might witness what was about to unfold. Emma walked up the gravel path alone, her heart pounding as she approached the front door. Before she could knock, the door opened to reveal Dr. Richard Hawthorne. He looked exactly as she remembered from her recovered memories, a distinguished man in his 50s with kind eyes and a gentle smile that masked his true nature. "Emma," he said warmly, "I was wondering when you'd come back to me. You've been having problems with the treatment, haven't you?" "The memories are coming back," Emma said, allowing her voice to shake with genuine emotion. "I keep remembering my father's death, the funeral, the pain. I thought you had fixed that. I thought you had given me a life where he was still alive." Dr. Hawthorne stepped aside to let her enter. The cabin's interior was set up like a makeshift medical facility, with several rooms that appeared to be patient quarters. Emma could hear voices from other parts of the building, other victims who were still trapped in Dr. Hawthorne's artificial realities. "The treatment requires maintenance, Emma," Dr. Hawthorne explained, leading her to a comfortable chair in what appeared to be his office. "The human mind naturally wants to return to truth, even when that truth is painful. That's why my patients need regular sessions to reinforce the positive memories and suppress the traumatic ones." "How many patients do you have here?" Emma asked, looking around nervously. 7, including yourself. All of them were suffering from severe grief and depression when I found them. Like you, they were desperate for relief from their pain. I've given them beautiful lives, Emma. Lives where their loved ones never died, where their traumas never occurred. Isn't that better than the alternative? Emma felt sick listening to him justify his crimes, but she forced herself to stay in character. "I want to go back to that life. I want to forget about my father's death again. Can you help me?" Dr. Hawthorne smiled and moved toward a cabinet filled with various medical supplies. Of course I can help you. The process involves a combination of mild sedatives, guided hypnosis, and what I call memory reconstruction therapy. You'll spend a few days here while I rebuild the positive memory structures and eliminate the traumatic ones. What about the others? The people I was with at Niagara Falls, my photography class? Those were constructed memories, designed to give you a sense of purpose and belonging. I can recreate them, make them even more vivid and satisfying than before. You'll have friends, mentors, a whole life that exists exactly as you want it to be. Emma watched as Dr. Hawthorne prepared a syringe, presumably containing the sedative he had mentioned. This was the moment she had been waiting for, clear evidence of his methods and his intent to continue his illegal experiments. Dr. Hawthorne, she said, before we begin, I need to understand something. How did you find me? How did you know I was grieving? He paused in his preparations, clearly pleased to discuss his methodology. I monitor obituaries, funeral homes, grief support groups. I look for individuals who are isolated, who don't have strong support systems. You were perfect, Emma. A young woman who had lost her only remaining parent, who had dropped out of school and was living alone. You were desperate for relief from your pain. And the others? How did you find them? Similar circumstances. Maria lost her husband in a military deployment. James lost his teenage son in a drowning accident. Sarah lost her entire family in a house fire. All of them were ready to do anything to escape their grief, even if it meant living in a carefully constructed fantasy. Emma felt tears welling up in her eyes, but not from grief this time, from anger. You stole their lives. You stole my life. We had the right to grieve, to heal naturally, to find our own way through the pain. Dr. Hawthorne's expression changed, becoming less gentle and more calculating. Emma, you're having a relapse. This is exactly why you need treatment. The pain you're feeling right now, this is what I saved you from. Let me help you forget again. No, Emma said firmly, standing up from the chair. I don't want to forget anymore. My father's death was real, and my grief was real, and both of those things are part of who I am. You had no right to take that away from me. Dr. Hawthorne moved toward her with the syringe, but Emma was ready. FBI, nobody move. Agent Rivera and his team burst through the cabin's doors, weapons drawn. The next few hours were a blur of activity, as FBI agents secured the scene and began the delicate process of helping Dr. Hawthorne's other victims. Each person would need extensive psychological support to distinguish between their real memories and the false ones that had been implanted. Some had been living in their artificial realities for years and might never fully recover. Emma found herself in the unique position of being both a victim and a key witness. Her testimony would be crucial in ensuring that Dr. Hawthorne faced justice for his crimes. More importantly, her recovery proved that his victims could reclaim their real lives, no matter how painful those lives might be. 6 months later, Emma stood once again at Niagara Falls, but this time she was there by choice. She had returned to Buffalo State College, changed her major to psychology, and was working toward becoming a counselor who specialized in helping trauma victims. The sound of the cascading water no longer filled her with dread. Instead, it reminded her of her own strength and resilience. She pulled out her camera, her father's old camera, which she had kept after his death, and began taking pictures. Not the desperate artistic shots she had been pursuing when Dr. Hawthorne first approached her, but simple, honest photographs that captured the beauty of the moment without trying to escape from reality. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Agent Rivera. Hawthorne sentenced to 25 years. All 7 victims are in recovery programs. Your testimony made the difference. Emma smiled, feeling a sense of closure she had never experienced during her months of artificial happiness. The pain of her father's death would always be with her, but so would the love they had shared and the strength he had given her to face whatever challenges life might bring. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through Emma's story of loss, manipulation, and ultimate redemption. If this tale of psychological thriller and human resilience captivated you, please give this video a thumbs up and let me know in the comments what you thought about the twists and turns we discovered together. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss our next gripping story. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most beautiful lies can't compare to the strength we find in facing our hardest truths. See you in the next video.